The algorithm knows all. Last video, I criticized the claim that C.S. Lewis excluded Susan from Deeper Narnia, the Heaven equivalent, because of some sort of sexism. A week later, this clickbait appeared on my feed. It rehashes many of the interpretations by J.K. Rowling, Philip Pullman, with a dash of Neil Gaiman. I already debunked these interpretations as being disconnected from a careful reading of the text. A link will be provided at the end of the video if you missed it. But I've been running defense so far, and I'd like to get on the offense by making a positive claim that not only is this Susan business nothing to do with sexism, but in fact, of all the children to have entered Narnia, Susan is the most logical choice to be excluded from Deeper Narnia. I will justify this claim as a matter of narrative and character. Let's dive in for a closer read. Stay a while and listen. So first, for the narrative. Why even have a character miss out in Narnia Heaven? Because you could just have absolutely everyone arrive there and everyone lives happily ever after. And I think if that happened, we would see the opposite argument leveled at Narnia, which we already see at more hopeful fantasies in Narnia and Lord of the Rings. It's too simple. There's not enough morally gray. But I think having one character miss out, not be there, adds a level of at least emotional complexity to a children's story. And I think that's significant. We desire for everything to work out in the end. There's some sort of longing there. And I can recall the first time I read The Lord of the Rings. And I got to the end, we kind of got Shire back up on its feet again, and then we discover that, yes, the world has been saved, but not saved for Frodo. And Frodo must leave this land. He's not been permanently healed. He must go away. And not only him, but Gandalf is going to leave, and Elrond and Galadriel. And you end Lord of the Rings, and it's a victory, but there's a huge sense of loss, as it feels like the magic is going out of the world. And in fact, you go on to read the appendices, which I did, it seems like the lands are empty. There's no more elves there. And finishing that story was quite the emotional experience. Great victory with great loss. And there's a sense of longing, of wanting everything to be complete and whole again. And it's not quite back to how it was. There's pieces that are missing. It leaves you with something, and it shows a lot of trust that C.S. Lewis and Tolkien have in children to deal with these complex emotions of winning and yet with this great loss. So that's how I would justify it, just on narrative grounds of a character, any of the characters, at least one not making, and to present that before kids. And it sticks with you. We're still talking about it. So if we are going to have a character that is no longer going to be a friend of Narnia, that doesn't believe it exists anymore, the question is, which one? Which one makes the most sense? Two that we can eliminate as an option right off the bat is Eustace and Jill. They're already in Narnia. They aren't Thomas Covenant, so it's not that sort of story. They are in Narnia. They can be quickly eliminated from contention. So if not Eustace and Jill, we could look at the first two, Polly and the Professor. Polly, I think, is a poor choice. She only shows up in one novel, The Magician's Nephew. It's not the most well-known of the series. She's also the voice of reason of what a true, mature adult is. Not an ideal choice. The Professor is a possibility, but for a different sort of story where the wise mentor becomes corrupt and no longer believes what they once were. That's not probably Narnia. In any event, the Professor was used from the very first book to introduce the trilemma that Lucy is probably telling the truth just based on logic. So this is not the ideal candidate for someone to miss out on Narnia due to lack of faith. For biggest impact for one person that's missing, I would say it would have to be the original four. You enter into Narnia with Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. And if you think Narnia, you're probably thinking those four kids, if you know anything about Narnia. So by narrative, one of these four would have the most impact when one of them is missing. So then we should look at their character and their character arc to see which of these four would make the most sense to not make it, at least temporarily. Lucy is a bad choice, at least with this sort of children's story. If you wanted to tell a more cynical one, sure, but Lucy has been the girl of faith all the way through. She was the first to enter into Narnia. She held to a very difficult story to believe against her older siblings. In Prince Caspian, she was the first to see Aslan. It took the others quite a bit longer, and again, she had to follow Aslan even when no one else could see him. So she has been very consistently the girl of faith. You could tell a story in which the girl of faith loses her faith, but I would argue you could not do it off the pages of the book. You would have to tell that story on the pages of the book. You can't pull a Last Jedi and change the personality of Luke Skywalker in between movies. You can fight me on this one, but The Last Jedi did Luke Skywalker dirty. It's too significant of a change to do it off the pages of the book. So for that reason, I would eliminate Lucy off the bat. Edmund is the Hollywood choice, and a bad one. A bad Hollywood choice. The bad Hollywood choice is to take a character who went through a character arc. He was the traitor, he disbelieved, he was quite a rotten character, and he had this redemption arc. And the Hollywood move is in the sequel, well, we've run out of character arcs to do, so let's revert. Let's send them back to their bad old ways and make them go through the same old character arc again. And in the trilogy, we'll make him do it all over again, or maybe with the next generation. So Edmund was the traitor. Edmund disbelieved Lucy. Edmund knew what the truth was and all denied it, making fun of Lucy. And yes, you could tell that story, but it's not a good one, to just keep on recycling the same old story arc. So this leaves us with the eldest two children. Peter's a possibility, but there's not a lot of characterization that would push us in this direction. He's been the High King Peter. He's the default leader of the group, being the eldest. He could have a crisis of faith, certainly, but there's not really a great direction for him off the pages of the book. He tends to be one of the first ones to defend Lucy against some of the others. In Prince Caspian, the direction of who sees Aslan first is Lucy, then Edmund, then Peter, then finally Susan, and then Trumpkin last of all. Trumpkin has the delicious irony of being a fantastical creature who doesn't believe in other fantastical creatures. C.S. Lewis has a lot of fun with that sort of thing. His positioning as High King also makes it a bit awkward, where he's held as even really High King over and above Prince Caspian. As part of the Golden Age, everything is underneath the High King Peter. So you have the High King of Narnia underneath Aslan, mind you. That doesn't make it possible, but there's not really a clear character direction that would put Peter as anything other than he is a stolid follower of Aslan, and he doesn't always get it right, but when shown the error of his ways, he follows along. Which leaves us with Susan. So take a look at this passage that is found in Prince Caspian. The lion roars. They went in a direction that they thought would take them to Prince Caspian's camp. It turned into a dead end. Lucy had heard a message from Aslan, but nobody believed her because no one else could see. She meets Aslan again. She tries to wake up the party. And then you get this sequence. And I'd like you to notice the contrasting how the different personalities argue. "I can't see anything," said Peter after he stared his eyes sore. "Can you, Susan?" "No, of course I can't," snapped Susan, "because there isn't anything to see. She's been dreaming. Do lie down, go to sleep." "Don't talk nonsense, Lucy," said Susan. "Of course you can't go off on your own. Don't let her, Peter. She's been downright naughty." "I'll go with her, if she must go," said Edmund. "She's been right before." So notice how we have this character change with Edmund. He disbelieved her in the past, but he doesn't see anything now, but he's willing to go along with Lucy just because she's been right in the past before and he's been wrong. This shows growth for Edmund. "I know she has," says Peter, "and she might have been right this morning. We certainly had no luck going down the gorge. Still, at this hour of night, and why should Aslan be invisible to us? He never used to be. It's not like him. What does the DLF say?" That's their nickname for Trumpkin. And so Trumpkin doesn't believe any of it. But he says, "If you guys split up, I'm going to go with the High Kings." "He's beating his paws on the ground for us to hurry," said Lucy. "We must go now. At least I must. You have no right to force the rest of us like that. It's 4-1, and you're the youngest." "Oh, come on," growled Edmund. "We've got to go. There'll be no peace till we do." He fully intended to back Lucy up, but he was annoyed at losing his night's sleep and was making up for it by doing everything as sulkily as possible. So we see growth, but there's that personality bit that gets in there. "On the march then," said Peter, wearily fitting his arm into his shield strap and putting his helmet on. At any other time he would have said something nice to Lucy, who was his favorite sister, for he knew how wretched she must be feeling, and he knew whatever had happened, it was not her fault, but he couldn't help being a little annoyed with her all the same. Susan was the worst. "Suppose I started behaving like Lucy," she said. "I might threaten to stay here, whether the rest of you went or not. I jolly well think I shall." "Obey the High King, your Majesty," said Trumpkin, "and let's be off. If I'm not allowed to sleep, I'd as soon march as stand here talking." Again, I love Trumpkin. He's so practical. So skipping through, they follow. All they can see is Lucy. She's the only one that can see Aslan. Then Edmund sees him, or at least a bit of his shadow. Peter's voice saying, "Oh, buck up, Susan. Give me your hand. Why, a baby could get down here, and do stop grousing." Then Edmund sees him for sure. And then Peter says, "Maybe, but the light's so tricky." So here, Susan finally does see Aslan. She does apologize for it. And then she gives some reasoning here. This is Susan. "But I've been far worse than you know. I really believed it was him. Yesterday, when he warned us not to go down to the firwood. And I really believed it was him tonight when you woke us up. Deep down inside, or I could have if I'd let myself. But I just wanted to get out of the woods, and I don't know. Whatever am I to say to him?" "Perhaps you won't need to say anything," suggested Lucy. So here we actually have an example of Susan that did believe deep down that something did exist, that Aslan had arrived, but she was suppressing it. We see something in Susan here that if you were to tell a story off the pages of the book, we're told in a couple sentences, this is what happened. This is the best character to choose. Peter does not have this sort of dialogue. It's a fairly complicated one. It's very interesting that Susan has this, that she believed, but she suppressed, and she's very muddled about it. Isn't that what happens to her at the end of the last battle? So this is why not only are those articles wrong with it's problematic that Susan didn't make it in, or Susan didn't make it in, and that's a bad thing. Susan is the best character. If you're going to have one of the children not make it, it's got to be of the four. That has the most impact to create that longing that we have victory with loss, and we have that longing for us to be whole again, but we're not there. It's got to be the original four. And if you look at the original four, Lucy, girl of faith, not the right one. Edmund, to revert on the redemption story is a poor idea. Peter, possible, but there's not a lot of direction to go with that. But Susan has this arc throughout the two books that she's in, the two most popular of the stories, in which she's usually the one that drags her heels, is one of the last people to believe and then see it. And in fact, we find out that she did believe, but suppressed it. And for that reason, if you're going to create a character arc that appears not on any pages of the book, but in between books, she's the logical character to choose. So if you like these sort of videos, give it a like and read some books.